Welcome to the HBTVS Store podcast. I'm your host, William, and today with me will be Sean.
Hello.
And Chad.
Hello.
And we'll be talking about It Chapter 2, the newest movie, the newest Stephen King adaptation, Part 2, which is directed by Andy Muschietti. So it's 2019, so the prior It film came out in 2017 because it came out the weekend that your daughter was born.
Yes.
It's something that, is like a huge hit.
It was like the financially the biggest horror film of all time, right?
Yeah, unadjusted for inflation and all that stuff, it made $700 million worldwide. So a huge sum of money for a horror film. And one that, very much tapped into the cultural zeitgeist of the kind of, Stranger Things is very much like Amblin-esque of, kids on bikes in the summer type deal. And Stranger Things kind of made that kind of get back in the popular consciousness, which, it wasn't new. It was just the Amblin stuff from the 80s, just kind of revisiting, like E.T., all that stuff. But Stranger Things was very much in that vein, which is what people, I think, were really wanting and looking for. So it delivered a movie with a bunch of, elaborate scare setups and a lot of tension, and even had one of the actors from Stranger Things and just had that feel of kids riding around bikes with a scary clown, just really tapped into a bunch of stuff and did very well financially. So the sequel's been very highly anticipated. So we'll be discussing that, and when we get into it, we'll start off without spoilers for the full story and kind of hold those for the end. But before we get into it, do you have something to talk about?
Sorry, I'm eating peanuts. So I watched Tigers Are Not Afraid last night in between editing and stuff. That was written by, I guess, Isa Lopez. And that is, I guess, a Spanish language film about a Mexican drug cartel, Mexican drug gang and stuff that these young kids get wrapped up into. I guess you heard a lot of buzz about this film.
I've seen some.
Yeah, it's it has a 90. It had a 96 or 97 on Rotten Tomatoes, and then when it came to streaming where more people would watch it, the Rotten Tomatoes actually went up because it got more reviews and it bumped it up. But it is, when I watched it, I was like, oh, this seems like this will be very much in Del Toro's wheelhouse because it is it's a fairy tale-esque horror film that, it really does lean into the drama of it and the fairy tale aspects more than just an It Chapter 2 Funhouse of Horror scares every 20 minutes or something. But that's not saying it drags like that at all. But it is, but then I got looking and it was on his list of top 10 films of 2017 or whatever.
Yeah.
So he was a fan of this, but it seemed like it was directly in his wheelhouse. So if you're a fan of Del Toro, I think this may be something you may like. What is that Del Toro film? Set during, oh my gosh.
Pan's Labyrinth?
No.
Chronos or...
No, that's a vampire. But Pan's Labyrinth, people drew comparison to that.
Oh, Devil's Backbone?
Devil's Backbone, yes.
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me of Devil's Backbone a little bit, and kind of, that is a horror film, but, it's not it very much seems in that vein.
Or did you see The Orphanage? He didn't direct
part
it,
of it. Yeah, only part of that. But it also is, I think, goes places that we would not expect any mainstream American horror film to go, and I think it is cliche to say, but it's powerful in some regards. But again, I have a young kid, and this is about a group of kids who lost their parents. Yeah. So they're orphans living out on the streets, which for me, that's a biggest fear of oh, what happens if something happened to me and Nicole and we didn't raise her, even if our parents did, she wouldn't be the same person. But so you see these kids in these terrible situations, and then I guess sort of the lead character, she loses her mother, but then she gets, again, it's like a fairy tale. There's a shooting at school, or her teacher gives her 3 pieces of chalk, and she says, "You got 3 wishes, use them." So it is, this girl has 3 wishes essentially, but it's one of those things. It's like a monkey paw. The wish doesn't always turn out like you want it to.
Yeah.
And so they get wrapped up with having one of their phones that has some stuff on there. And so it's all about this kind of underground world. And it's obviously something that, is not a similar plot in many films at all. It doesn't, you don't see many films following a group of kids in Mexico who are living on their own, running from, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you get soaked in this environment that you don't see much of in American cinema, obviously, because this is a Mexican film. So that, again, I just appreciate ones that expose me to a different world and perspective. Like, there's homeless kids living on the street everywhere. You hear about, there's more of them in Mexico than, or you hear stories, like terrible stories and stuff like that. So it brings you into that world. It's wrapped up with a great story. But it does have those fairy tale like elements where there are like, some little creature moments and stuff like that, like that's sprinkled throughout. It's not like it's just a straight drama. And again, like I said, some terrible things happen in this. She feels like she's not afraid to kind of go there, but it never feels like it's in for the sake of being shocking.
And where's it on again?
It's called Tigers Are Not Afraid, and it's on Shudder.
Shudder. Okay.
Yeah, I think they got the exclusive streaming rights. I don't know if you can rent it anywhere, but Shudder's only $5 a month, so that would be the same cost as renting it basically if you get a month of Shudder.
And two, don't they have the One Cut of the Dead, that one zombie film that got a lot of buzz?
I think they're getting that.
Or getting it,
Yeah, they don't have it yet, but I really want to see that. I mean, they've been releasing a lot of stuff. They have that new, is it Nosferatu or Nose?
NOS.
Is it Joe Hill? Is that Stephen King's son?
Yes.
Yes. So I don't know if you heard of that. There's a great buzz about that. They're releasing episodes of that on there. They've got a lot of great stuff. So anyway, that film has a whole lot of buzz as far as like indie horror films go, but even just horror films in general. So I just wanted to watch it to give us some perspective on it.
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, this is one that I will. Like, I didn't give it a 5-star. Rated it on Letterboxd. I didn't give it a 5-star, but I think I probably gave it like a 4.5. I was debating on maybe a 4. Yeah. But that being said, even if I was to give it a 4, like, I'm going to remember moments of this film more than I remember most every other horror film this year. You know what I mean? Like, as far as the impact, and that this is going to be higher for me personally than most of those. But I definitely recommend checking it out. It may or may not be your thing, but it's absolutely going to be, I think, an important horror film for this year. So I'm going to make sure I wanted to see it anyway, and it came up there. It hit, I think, this past week on Shudder. So, yeah, I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yep, and so depending on the timing, so either the episode after this or the episode after that. So sometime in the next few weeks, the episode after this. So I was in New Orleans on trip, and so we have an episode coming out at some point soon. It's either, like I said, the one following us, the one after that, depending on the timing of what happens with when we can cover 3 from Hell. We did an episode about creepy stuff and supernatural and cryptids and all that stuff. So you can
Paranormal, UFO, Crypticon.
So you can check that out. And that I talked some about with the stuff in New Orleans I saw, and that was part of. So sometime on that trip, I saw nothing aside from It Chapter 2.
In the butt. A ghost, right?
Yeah.
A ghost.
Listen to William's story about getting pinched in the ass.
A ghost attacked me.
I watched a couple other things too. I mean, I'm not going to, they're not new stuff, but just to drop them real quick because they were good. Let me see if I can find it. Society, Brian Yuzuna film from 1989, which is like, commentary on rich people, you know what I mean? Like rich society and I guess 1% or whatever. That was pretty wild. It's on Shudder as well, and there was I think there's a Joe Bob episode. I believe that's what I watched, was a Joe Bob episode on it, which is always fascinating because you get all this commentary in between it. And then King Cohen, the Wild World of filmmaker Larry Cohen, who he passed away this year, but it was basically, how he made his films and kind of his career, and it was made at the time he was still working, but he did the stuff. Probably, Maniac Cop, Q, The Winged Serpent. He wrote Phone Booth, which I didn't know.
Yeah.
The Joel Schumacher film.
Colin Farrell.
Yeah, like It's Alive. So Salem's Return to Salem's Lot, not Salem's Lot, obviously. But yeah, so he's just like one of those indie filmmakers who, at Days of the Dead, they were talking about, we're not still shots. It was talking about all the stuff he did. It's just crazy stories of him just doing whatever it took to make a movie for no money or very low money, but also knowing how much to spend. Like, we're going to get these. Like, he would have a strategy like, hey, what stars? He said he knew every celebrity in town and stars, like even if they were Oscar winners, like which ones need to make some payments on their house, or which ones are kind of in debt and looking for work. So he would be able to grab these bigger names because they just needed to work. So he knew they would accept it for a paycheck, even if it wasn't a big one. So he was very strategic in being able to make and work the industry. He was very prolific in how much he wrote, because he was always writing. They said he was an ideals man. So that's a very cool documentary, but that's also on Shudder. That's one I just popped up while I was working, but very, very awesome doc.
Yeah, Shudder. So now we're ready to move into It Chapter 2. So, long movie. It's like I said, we'll start off without spoilers. It's close to 3 hours? I forget the exact runtime.
Very long.
And
So it felt long to you guys?
Yeah.
well, and two, it's very much the whole thing where that's a movie where if you're going to go in with snacks and drinks and everything, you will have to take a bathroom break. And
Yeah, don't go to the late showing, because it's like
See, I went
2 in the morning you get out.
I went to the 10:30. I had a Red Bull. I brought a Red Bull with me. I bought a big drink and some popcorn, but I managed to make it through the film.
it's 2 hours and 49 minutes. So, I mean, it's not that the length of a movie necessarily determines, how much you're going to like it. Because, like Avengers, Endgame, and Infinity War are both long. So the first It from 2017 was 2 hours and 15 minutes, which to me is a lot more palatable length because, 2 hours is still a long time, but near 3 hours, I think there was some stuff they could have cut. But, so the movie had, after the first It was such a monumental success. Oh, so Chad, what would you like? So we had done an episode on the first It back whenever it came out. Like, were you super positive on the first one, or?
Yeah, the first one that came out, I thought it was pretty good. We went and seen it in the theaters as well, and I liked it. I think the story went pretty good, and like I said, it was only it wasn't as long as this one, so like 2 hours, 15 minutes, so it wasn't that bad. But I don't know what it is, like with movies nowadays, they have to have it 2 hours or more. It's like, if you're not going to have an intermission, it's like, especially when you have kids and stuff.
I heard somebody say maybe they should bring intermissions back because movies are going. The only case they make for this is it being adapted from a book. Like, you know what I mean? Like they could have re-engineered it all. You know what I mean? And even cut some characters or something and really figured it out. But
even though I took my younger cousins to this one, they're like, a lot of stuff was like filler. Because without getting into spoilers or anything, towards the end, it was just like, it just felt like it was just dragging it out. I was like, come on, man, wrap it up and conclude it. We don't need to see all this other stuff.
See, I know I'm in the minority because most people are way cooler on this than that first one. And you like the first one quite a bit, right?
Yeah, forget if you go back and look. I think for the type of movie it was pretty perfect for that type of film. It kind of had the nostalgia, heartstring pulls. It had people complain, oh, it's not really horror, it's not scary. Well, it's if you watch enough stuff, nothing's really scary. And if you're saying the scariest film out there is Serbian film, that's not scary, that's just gory and gross. That's not saying that's bad if you like. I'm just saying there's a lot of stuff around it, but I thought in terms of for what it was, a popcorn summer horror film, perfect. Hit all the right marks. It was very enjoyable. It's one that I think I will go back and rewatch over time. This one, I don't know I'll do that. But I think to a lot of people, when you go back to the original It miniseries, the stuff I remember from that was the kids. I remember Georgie with the boat. I remember all that stuff. I don't remember the ending as much.
Yeah.
And I think that we're going to have that same phenomenon play out with this film as well.
Yeah. So for me, I like that original quite a bit. I was pretty impressed with it. It did that one, but see, for me, it's been a while since I watched it. I tried to turn it on while I was working the other day because I had no recollection of any of the characters or anything. Yeah. For me, the nostalgia really wasn't a thing for me on that one, and honestly, the group of kid characters, some of it felt a little forced originally, which I didn't mind it. I didn't really knock the film much for it because everything else I did was fun enough. That film felt like a perfect popcorn blockbuster horror. I heard somebody call this a horror action film. As a detriment, but it almost feels as an action in that there's not a lot of build up and dread. There are for individual scenes, but really it's just it gets you hit after hit. And I feel like that's what that first one did too. There was the mystery unraveling, and maybe that's why Some people like that first one more because it was that whole experience.
Well,
and so much was unraveled by the end, even though we go further in this one, not everything was. So therefore, there was, things to be left to discover.
Well, in the first film, it felt like they did a lot of, you would have what would start off as like a scare sequence. So you would have them kind of start off, so a lot of times when you're talking about horror films, the way they do it is you have a tense situation. It escalates, it escalates, it escalates. Something deflates the tension, whether it be a joke, whether it be a funny moment, and then you feel safe, and then it hits you with the jump scare. And that's how a lot of films operate. The first hit was more of an introduce like the situation, just ratchet up, jump scare and end. It didn't really typically do the up and downs, and it kind of spaced it out. So about every 10 minutes, it had some little set piece sequence. And it feels like this movie tries to do that too. It's just the scares aren't there.
There's a lot more jump scares in the second one.
I loved. So for me, we did Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Did you see that, Chad?
I haven't seen it yet. No.
So the thing I liked about it was the character designs.
Yeah.
Granted, they were based off illustrations, but that's what I loved about this one was that there wasn't just it wasn't just a single, you know what I mean, an entity or something like that. It was, I loved that you never knew what you were going to get, and I love the designs, like the old lady, which that was they released that whole sequence, but her design and stuff when that gets revealed, like so much of that for me, that was the fun of it. Where we were talking about the plot before, and there was some things that were maybe not handled well or whatever. But for me, this was almost like, so it was fast paced for me, but it was so many quick hits of new things that's what I wanted out of this specific film, because, this isn't your contemplative like art house film that didn't leave me with any sort of big impact or anything. I didn't walk away with anything from this film too much. But yeah, there's some nice moments in it, I think, for sure. But because of that, I'm glad they just leaned into going big on the character designs. Like, this feels like you saw all the money on screen. And you don't always get a horror film like that, because horror film budgets are often restricted because of the nature of them.
Yeah. It was like they're trying to compensate for the first one. They want to put more monsters in the second one to kind of feed that storyline going into it.
The thing I think it does, watching it again, I thought was, it's a knock against it, but ultimately I was like, whatever, it's fine. The first one they deal with, the trauma of, what's the female character's name? It's Jessica Chastain.
Oh, Beverly.
Beverly. She has an abusive father in more ways than one. Mm. They lean into that in the first one, and I feel like they spend some time on it. And maybe because it's already been set up, but this one, we kind of start out and it refreshes a little bit of that, but with her husband and stuff, but it goes so fast, it almost feels like they're using this sort of like
trauma,
really terrible issue as a shorthand plot device. You know what I mean? Well, and that's what a lot of this film feels like. And it almost feels distasteful at time, and almost like an exploitative film. You know what I mean? Like a film where something bad happens to somebody, and then we're going to go get revenge.
Well, yeah,
But I was kind of like, that's all right, because it delivers on everything else for me.
I think the thing that this movie does, so two major things, two things it touches on. So, like you said, the Beverly character touches on an abusive father and the elements of that. And then it touches on having an abusive husband with domestic abuse. And then it also deals with homophobia in multiple ways.
And suicide. Which is a weird, I thought that message was a little bit weird. Also, by the end of the film, I was like, that's weird. I don't know if that's great. There's a lot of things I thought was problematic about this film. Not to take that turn, but at the end, I was like... So
the thing that I would say is, a lot of times you can touch on those serious societal issues if you earn it. You can earn the ability to bring it in, because if you bring it in to then make it a disgusting, salient point that leaves people walking out of the theater thinking about those elements, I don't think this movie earned those points. Now, here's a lot of that was in the book, because it's based on a book. A lot of it was in these different interpretations. I just think that the way the movie is kind of cut up,
it felt rushed. Those elements all felt rushed.
It felt rushed, and it didn't feel like they necessarily earned some of it.
Well, it kind of went out the gate, like as soon as the film started.
Yes, yeah.
You went right into it.
And then but then of course you go right into it, but then it's like, oh, this is for scares also. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then we go into it, and it's just because of the pacing of the film, that stuff doesn't get the time that maybe it warrants. So it feels like it is just there too. But again, being based on a book,
like I said, so it's like a lot of the stuff, like the opening scene that was in the book. There was other stuff in the movie that was in the book, because I hadn't actually read the book myself. I did go and read the synopsis at least, because I had watched the original miniseries in the 90s, then read up on how it actually went, because it's just a long book, and I had just not gotten into reading it. But so there's like some of the stuff, like, they're adapting it from the book, and I understand that they kept it in, but it just felt like they didn't give it some of the time to breathe that I'm sure the book would have given it. And then there's other stuff they wisely cut, like the orgy scene apparently. So in the first movie, they're in the sewers, and then they have trouble getting back out and finding their way out. So to bring unity to the group, they have an orgy so that they can then be back in unity and figure out how to get out. So they very wisely omitted that from the first film or this one. But just taking out the fact that there's source material, just like in the movie, I felt like they didn't earn some of the messages or some of the things they touched on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you have like the exploitation films that you talked about, where there's just rape all over the place and it's never earned and it's just a plot point. It doesn't go to that extreme at all, but I just think that they introduce things and don't have enough time around it to really earn the discussion.
It's almost like, you talk about action blockbusters, the spectacle and stuff gets in the way of some of the story. All the story gets pushed aside so they can have time for the big action set pieces, and that's what this does. But again, for me, I was like, whatever, that's fine. And it's just like Godzilla King of the Monsters. Like, I like that film quite a bit, no matter how stupid it was, only because it was unique and that we don't get a lot of kaiju movies like that at that budget. And that's why I like both of these films.
They're both Warner Brothers, aren't they?
Yeah, is because we don't get many horror films that feel that are quite the same tone,
that feel like an
pace.
event.
Yeah, that feel like an event, and we'll have the sequel to The Shining, Doctor Sleep, but I don't think that's going to be the same sort of like popcorn, crowd pleasing horror film in the same way. It may be, but based on his other films, it's not going to be the same pace. And I just, something about it, because it is original, I'm like, give me that garbage. Like, this is the cheeseburger. This is like a Michael Bay horror film when it's like, hey, everything else doesn't line up with the stories and characters, but the spectacle, like they really try to go at it hard.
So it's like you talked about that Tigers Are Not Afraid, like referencing Guillermo del Toro. It feels like if he had made a movie, he would have focused on one specific element of trauma and made that be alive with the movie then unfolds around. This is just like, here's a few different ones.
It's the nature of them having 6 characters or whatever, and everybody's got their quote unquote character trait, self-doubt or, things they're hiding, all this stuff. It's all about them having, and I can see why the book was long and how this probably delved into a lot of things. But as a movie, they just make those as little bullet points to set up a scare scene, or why Pennywise is terrorizing and how he's terrorizing, because it's always their fear or whatever. Yeah. Which, it's a weird thing. Like, maybe a miniseries would have been better, and in each episode, like, you would have had like one episode is on
maybe they'll
Bill Hader's character, and you get to spend like an hour and delving into that, and that's the theme of that episode.
Maybe they'll pull a Tarantino and recut the 2 movies into a miniseries for Netflix, because I know they talked about was it Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
But again, I liked the pace of it. I like the pace of it.
The pace was good. Like, probably the 3/4 of the way through, and then towards the end, it was just like it just kind of
went to be
just kind of went down.
Which, I mean, when you get over that 2 hour and 15 mark, but you can start testing people's patience.
Yeah, by that time, it's like you're already,
unless you're really,
they got you amped up, ready to go, and then it's just like you just kind of slowly decline, and it's like.
Let's see. So 2 we didn't mention. So the adult cast in this film. So Jessica Chastain is Beverly. James McAvoy is Bill. Bill Hader is Richie. Isaiah Mustafa is Mike. Jay Ryan is Ben. James Ransone is Eddie. Andy Bean is Stanley. Of course, you have Bill Skarsgård back as Pennywise. What's funny is they're doing the casting announcements and stuff. So James Ransone does look almost exactly like the kid he's supposed to be playing, Eddie. And most of them are pretty good matches. Because like there's all the fan casting. Like Bill Hader was pretty good casting. Because I think too a big difference in this movie is like with Bill Hader. There's a lot of comedic moments. There's a lot of quippy one-liners or kind of back and forth little conversations. And the original had it too, because like the young version of Richie was like foul mouthed and everything too. But I think that some people said that Bill Hader is a little bit different movie than some of the other cast. I'm not sure if I disagree with that or agree, but like I definitely liked his performance. I thought he brought a lot.
In the first one, Richie felt a little. I like that actor because I liked him in Stranger Things a lot. He was really good in that.
Yeah.
But the just something about it just felt a little out of place and forced for the first one for me. It didn't ruin the film at all. I was fine, but I think that's what kind of broke the chemistry in some regards. But for this, I felt like this they fit together a little bit better, even though I don't know. I could also see the argument that this didn't feel as much like a group of friends, but I liked the Richie character more in this one. It felt more natural to me.
I mean,
maybe it is because he's an adult, and
part of it is they forgot about Derry when they're away from it. The memories receded and faded, and then when they get back, it starts coming back.
Well, there was a 27 years,
yeah, I think
gap.
every 27 years.
So these characters have not met up with each other since they were kids.
Yeah.
So when they finally get together as adults, they have to kind of like reminisce and go back to like start to remember what happened and everything.
And I love that first diner scene when they're together and stuff. Like,
yeah,
I like that. And then there's some spectacle there, like all that. I was like, hey man, I was on board.
And they did a good job of mixing in like the comedy and stuff with this, and still having that scare factor.
Yeah,
into it.
And two, I was talking to Julie downstairs about it because she wasn't super hot on it either. But I said for me, it may have also been the case of past couple of times I went to theaters, like A Scary Story to Tell in the Dark, and there's something else too. I think that I just was kind of bored through a lot of it, And I talked about like I was just ready. I was checking my phone, like I'm kind of just ready to go. I could walk out right now and be fine. But for this, it was the first time in a little while since Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or like Midsummer or something that I was like, oh yeah, I'm ready to just sit here and keep watching this film for as long as it goes. And for me, it never faded off. But maybe it's just because I was like so happy to be sitting in a theater and like enjoying myself for the first time in a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the elements too, like we mentioned, like the diner scene. Like I really liked the diner scene, but I did think that it kind of went into kind of, it's like there's a part where creatures start coming out and there's an altercation. They're like destroying the room they're in, and then the server comes in, and then it's kind of like a joke moment, and then they leave.
Yeah.
And then to me, that just kind of feels like because in the real world, the police would be called and all this stuff. So I feel like sometimes when they jump to those types of moments and play it off like a broad comedy and not more of the grounded world where you would have consequences for all that, you have to like deal with it. It felt like there's times they kind of have like this detachment from reality, because like if people get a call from a friend that they haven't seen in 27 years and they don't even really remember at first, and they just go back to their hometown and leave their home lives, especially if a character's married and stuff. If a character is married with a very overprotective, overbearing wife, there's no way she's not calling him nonstop while he's there and or wanting to come down herself. So there's like these things where they kind of set up these scenarios, but then kind of detach it from the real world. Because in the real world, if some of these characters were here, they would have to be interacting more with the people. There need to be more explanation to their spouse or people that they left.
I totally agree. But for me, the tone of this, because I knew the tone of the first film, I felt like this is popcorn horror film, and we are just going along for the ride, and this exists in its own movie world.
Yeah.
Like I felt like it all fits well within the world of this film. But I totally get that, there's some tone shifts and they may not work for you. And some things may seem weird. But for me, I was just like, hey, this film's a bit goofy. Yeah. And I don't mean like it's a bit weird in some regards, the way they handle stuff. And I kind of was like settled into that. So that's why I let so many things fall by the wayside. Like all the terribly dumb things in Godzilla. I was like, whatever. I'm just ready to see Godzilla fight some monsters. In this, I was like, I'm loving seeing Bill Hader on a big screen. Not that I haven't before. Like, he was in Trainwreck, and that's the only one I can remember. But he was
super bad.
Yeah. He was so great in Barry that I was ready to see some more Bill Hader now that that's over. So I was just so happy to see him.
Yeah.
Jessica Chastain. I heard James McAvoy. I heard somebody say, "Oh, he was just so underwhelming because they didn't give him much." But for me, I enjoyed him in the film. Like, I thought he did a good job with what he had.
So I think that James McAvoy is always a good actor, but I do think as me and Julie were talking about it after we saw it, there's a lot of scenes where he's kind of dialed up to 11. Mm-hmm. Like when he interacts with like a kid he's trying to protect. He's like screaming kind of
Again, this is like just the smack you in the face summer horror film.
Because I think in today's world, a child would be more afraid of somebody saying there's a ghost clown versus a guy screaming and coming up and grabbing you and shaking you. So I think that the kid would probably be more afraid of him initially. So I think, and two, whether that was probably like as it was written or how directed.
Yeah.
So it's he's a very good actor because in Split and Split and what was the other one? Glass. He plays like 30 characters essentially, or 20. So you have so he's a very good actor. I just think that with him, he kind of got the more straight man role to everyone else because he didn't really have like the quirks or tics, like the OCD cleanliness or the foul mouth jokes and stuff like that. So he was more
Stephen King wrote himself as the pristine hero in this film.
So he's kind of, just running around trying to, but he has the emotional arc of his brother Georgie having died in the first film, as opposed to the other characters didn't necessarily lose someone like that to Pennywise, even though they had things in their lives that were not good. I
totally agree with all that for sure. But again, I think it's also me being so bored of so many horror films being so subdued that and those subdued moments are just so you get settled in and things work for you. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, okay, this is grounded. We get in here. But so many of those films, no matter how grounded they try to be, I just don't care half the time when they are just rely solely on the scares and stuff. So for me, again, that wasn't a negative for him to be up to 11. I was like, at least something's happening. At least it's not somebody walking around moping quietly or being afraid of every corner and nut. You know what I mean? Because so much of that stuff falls flat for me that I was like, at least just something's happening. Give me some conflict. Give me some him shaking a kid screaming like Chris Farley or Adam Sandler and Billy Madison. That's what I thought of that scene. I was laughing in the theater.
The way that the kid's response to that was perfect.
Yes, I was laughing in the theater to that. Yeah, it was ridiculous, but I also loved it. That's why I liked the first It, because it's so ridiculous.
To the fair.
And two, these movies, the first It and this one, like you talked about, so it's not a bad thing, but a lot of horror films, so there's the different type. There's the more art house, subdued, deadly, serious films. I'm trying to think of an example of something.
Hereditary. Which that works for me. I like that. I'm talking about the more of, even the bigger ones, like The Conjuring or something. There's some humor in that, but those films don't, they just feel
They take themselves seriously.
Yes, that's what it is.
The characters take the situations they're in seriously. Because, most movies, in the end, take themselves seriously. But, The Conjuring had, little moments of levity and stuff like that. But this movie, you have, Bill Hader almost being a fourth wall-breaking character.
Yes. And I think that's more my speed, generally speaking. Unless it's from unless, something like Midsummer, where it is just such a perfect vision, I think, and everything, for me, lines up so right. And even that film wasn't super serious, and that's probably why I liked it more than Hereditary.
Well, because it almost played things up as humor.
Yeah.
But with It Chapter 1 and 2, I think that they were kind of event films that you went into, and their goal was to let you have fun. And like you said, kind of like that summer blockbuster of horror, because people hadn't really done that too often. It was mostly just kind of, these mid to low budgeted, Insidious, Sinisters, those types of movies of the world.
And when's the last time you got a horror film with people on the caliber of Bill Hader? I know, he's kind of more known in the TV world, but you got Bill Hader, James McAvoy, and Jessica Chastain alone, not including the other people that are also phenomenal in this, but like you don't get many horror films with that level of talent. Like you got Emily Blunt, John Krasinski
in A Quiet Place.
But but still that was like a blockbuster type thing.
I'd say that like the main thing that we've been missing for a long time, because horror mostly lived in the world of your Blumhouses, your like $1 to $5 million budgets, and then like some of them we maybe get up to 10, and then like you had the Conjurings that maybe got up to like 20. But still, very achievable on modest means. A lot of horror lives in the low end of like the Hollywood releases. Like if Universal or Paramount or Warner Brothers, whoever's making a horror film, oftentimes the budget for that is much lower than any of their other releases for the year, even the dramas.
And you might get an Ethan Hawke as the lead, and what's his wife? Rose Byrne. You know what I mean? Like Rose Byrne's great, but would she go into that film now at her point in the career?
But I mean, the thing with like it was the first one was like a $40 million budget, so it wasn't Avengers or superhero money, but it wasn't the $5 million under Blumhouse. It was like, let's throw some resources at this, and we didn't really get that. And maybe we'll get that more now, where people say, oh, we can make a not mass market, we can make a high concept horror movie that actually has some resources behind it. Because if you the main thing I took away from watching these those two movies is they're beautifully shot. Yeah. Because people did a comparison of the It miniseries Georgie scene to the scene from the first It from 2017. You have the overhead crane shots and all the production value that just wasn't there. I mean, granted, it's 90s and TV. But they gave the production value to horror that they typically don't. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of directors in the horror world will probably like to do a bunch of crane shots and a bunch of camera movements and a bunch of the stuff that they just don't get the resources to do or the time.
Again, it's something we were talking about with Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, the complaint of the monsters not being enough. But I was like, the budget wasn't giant for that. They had to redesign a monster each time, and that got a crass person to either act it or develop it or whatever. And this is has double or triple of those amount of scenes. You know what I mean? Again, and you can see all that money on the screen. And for me, the stuff that is popular in theaters when we started off, and I'm talking about let's say 2004 stuff, when the found footage started getting big, and then paranormal Conjuring stuff like Saw, all those films, they were all super serious, and that's what we got as far as those big films, and none of that ever appealed to me really. Until, you know what I mean? And I don't know if this will, especially this being not a huge success critically, but I wish we would start getting some bigger budgeted, and not too crazy, but throw some money on the screen. Get some big actors in there, just so even if the script falls flat, you're happy watching Jessica Chastain on screen. You know what I mean? This is the bad way to look at filmmaking, where it's story. But look, there's a lot of great horror films that have phenomenal stories that are done for $5 million. They're done for $2 million. And we get those, and get your Midsommers and everything that are so great. But also, too, we're missing this range of this horror spectacle, where even if some elements fail, you're at least going to get something you don't get out of those $5 million films.
Because I think for so long, anytime they tried that, it failed at the box office. And
the levity, I think, is what, for me, helps this one succeed.
Because I think what happened was, you had the Tom Cruise Mummy, which was probably, $100 million budget, which I think was too much for what they were doing. And obviously that movie didn't pan out and didn't make money. So I think this operates in the zone. I think horror is probably better. So not having the expectations of a franchise starting, summer blockbuster trying to go up against, not X-Men, but Avengers and all that other stuff. I think I'm sure this had bigger budget than the first film because of the cast and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think that cast probably commanded.
But throw $40 to $60 million at a horror film, and you're going to get some interesting results. Now I think they may reserve that to the franchises and the reboots and the known quantities.
A Stephen King adaptation.
Stephen King is good business now.
Yeah,
you had It, Pet Sematary, the Netflix movies Gerald's Game, and what else? Was there another one?
Yeah, I think. Oh yeah, the one with Tom Jane.
Yeah,
1922
that was or something.
Good. Yeah.
So you had that, and then you had the Pet Sematary remake. Did you see that? The new one?
I don't.
It came out this year.
No, I haven't seen that one. Yeah. No, I have. Those are the ones with the mask. Walking.
Yeah.
We haven't seen that.
So, you've had all the Stephen King stuff come back into popular awareness, and then, like you said, with Dr. Sleep, it's going to have Ewan McGregor in it. It's coming from Mike Flanagan that did The Haunting of Hill House and Gerald's Game and stuff like that. So you have the kind of resurgence of the Stephen King, and you have the show Castle Rock on Hulu.
Yeah.
And then you have things like Stranger Things pulling a lot of Stephen King influences in it, in addition to a bunch of other things, John Carpenter, Aliens, all these other things.
And I think Stranger Things is also it's a TV show, so it has time to develop things more. But it is more in the wheelhouse of what I'm talking about, of like, hey, we're gonna have these fun moments and not take itself super seriously. That's sort of the TV version of this in some regards, of like, hey, we want to have fun. And for me, that's what this was. It wasn't like, I'm going to the movies to get scared. I'm going to the movies to have fun.
Well, because what's funny is, so I don't know about the screenings you all saw, but before the one we saw, they started playing like the Pennywise theme. It's like da da da, like that, that music, and then it's showing a bunch of balloons. And then it's actually a trailer for something else.
Yeah.
And people in the audience, when it was showing the balloons on it, like, oh, here we go. And people are getting scared. People are getting scared.
And it says this DC logo.
Yeah, I was like, is Pennywise?
They released that trailer online. It's the Birds of Prey.
The Harley Quinn. So that movie will exist. But so people are even just getting scared thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I remember like when the trailers were being shown before it came out, people got scared by it because they just are afraid of clowns. So this movie, I think to its detriment, like you said, it did have cool creature designs that interact with some of the characters. But it also did not really do enough with Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise. He was kind of relegated to being CGI and just showing his face. As opposed to in the first one, he had a lot more physicality and he's doing like the dancing clown stuff and all these things become popular memes. So I think
but maybe they're just like, hey, I don't know how the book goes, but we got a lot of that in the first film. Let's make this a little bit different. I don't know for sure.
But I think a lot of people were missing that.
Okay,
because that was like
the clown enthusiast. See, I don't care about any of that.
Enthusiast.
Yeah, the clowns don't scare me. I don't care. I just want to see. I just want to have fun in any way I can have it. So.
Yeah, it's like I think all the acting was good.
But I get that for sure. I never thought about that aspect.
I think all the acting and casting was well done. I think that they had some good set pieces that were fun. Like, it's always fun when a character just gets like a creature running at them. Because in the real world, you just think about what most people would do in that situation, and people probably freeze.
Yeah. Or
they probably just freak out and almost die. But see, like, there's a fun moment. Like I said, there was some commentary and stuff I didn't know they earned.
I also like that. Because I was like, man, I watched some recaps on my phone before going into the first one because I could not remember which characters, and I had IMDb pulled up to say what characters is here.
Yeah.
But I like that. Minor spoilers. A big plot point of this film is them having to remember what happened so many years ago.
Yeah.
Because that's what I was doing. Like, oh, this is actually helping me building into the story. I don't remember what actually happened.
They did build in a little bit.
But I guess that's how the
so a lot of that was surrounded by from the first movie when they split up.
Mm-hmm.
So that time frame between they split up in the first movie and their personal interactions with Pennywise, and then sort of it encapsulates that fear individually for them, and then they have to bring like was it artifact?
Yes, a memory or like an artifact that is a memory or something representative of that past.
Yeah, the creature design was I thought was pretty cool. Like you said, you didn't know what was going to come next.
Yeah.
Like with the grandma scene, which when I went, that got the most reaction. People were laughing and stuff. Of course, my cousins were cracking up.
Yeah.
But when the monster appeared, there's a lot of people jumping and stuff. But yeah, that was pretty cool. It actually reminded me of the scene when they're in the cave system underneath. It reminded me of Meg Mucklebones from Legend.
Okay, yeah.
When she rises out of the swamp and grabs people. That's what it reminded me of. So that was pretty cool.
Have you guys seen any of Junji Ito's art? He's a comic book artist, but he does a lot of horror comics basically. But they've adapted some of those. I think I talked about how that style kind of felt like scary. But this also felt like it was like pushing in that direction more. But they've adapted some of his stuff to anime as well. But he does manga mainly. But his designs are just like incredible and horrific. Even just looking at one image like tells a story. But that's how I got the feel out of this. Like every monster like that was crafted so well, I thought, to, you know, just even in the diner scene, the stuff popping out of the things. You know what I mean? Just the way, like, there was so much detail to all that stuff, and you could tell they spent time, like, really trying to figure out, like, they developed each one of those as long as you would almost develop a single creature for a horror film.
So, like, I guess to, like, kind of wrapping stuff up before getting into spoiler talk, like I said, so I think there's some good, you know, set piece moments. Like I said, the acting is good. The ending, to me, without spoiling it, just felt like it, you know, it's based on a book, so you can't really blame them too much for adapting what the source material was. But the ending to it felt very much like the kind of Deus Ex Machina Harry Potter endings where, oh, if you just do this and do that and believe it.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And I get why
That's
you do
true.
that. But the ending felt very much like a lot of fantasy movies fall into that. A lot of, you know, like I said, the Harry Potter movies sometimes do that. I mean, they're not as much. They have more rules on it. But, you know, like the never-ending story, like Tinkerbell, it's like if you believe in it, she'll come back to life. So I felt like the ending kind of had a lot of that to it. Like I said, taking out the fact that it's based on source material, just the movie itself in terms of how it entertained me, I felt that kind of fell flat. And then some of the end stuff was a little bit saccharine sweet. For some of the characters, but it didn't address the fallout of like some of the things that it did. And some of the way it treated some of the characters, I'm like, they kind of made this character look bad. And just kind of flighty and like, I'll get into spoilers, but so there's some moments I felt like the ending didn't really ring all that resonant for me. I felt like the first film ended stronger, but
Yeah,
it was able
I would
to.
say that for sure.
It was able to because it didn't have to wrap it up.
Yeah,
so I felt like once you actually get into like what Pennywise is and how to fight it, I'm like, this is all just kind of the gobbledygook of, there's not a real structure to this. This is just kind of a flighty type thing. I mean, other endings could have been more like a video game, like collect this and then you do this. But
which wouldn't have been as satisfying either.
I mean,
you know what I mean?
Like, a lot of horror films do that. Like some of the Nightmare on Elm Street, like, you know,
I heard
with Freddy.
I heard people draw comparisons, say this is almost like Dream Warriors as well.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, it kind of is. And actually, I'm like, yeah, Dream Warriors is cool, but I think this is more satisfying on that front of
Dream
them kind
Warriors,
of, you know.
I think a lot of people, without going back into that, because I think we've done an episode on it, but that movie's viewed a lot through the lens of people who loved it back when it came out.
Yeah.
And, or, you know, in their earlier years. And I think this movie, like you said, does take some of those concepts and really ratchets it up to be more palatable for a modern audience. It's just so damn long. But, like, in terms of giving a score, before we get into the spoilers, giving a score out of 10, because I think that the Rotten Tomatoes and the Metacritic and all that stuff, let's see, because so like on IMDb, the user score is at 7.0 out of 10. The Metacritic is 58. Like, I would probably fall somewhere between there, between like a 5. I think it's like a 7 or like a 6.5. I don't think it's like an amazing film like the first one. Like, 'cause the first one to me is like a surefire recommendation to most people. This one is a little bit more of, yeah, you can watch the first one, and then the second one concludes the story, but I don't think it's a must-see the same way that the first one became like as an event. It's like, so were you...
I give it, I was actually going to give it like a 7.5. Like you said, the first one's better as far as like story-wise, but I think the second one is, like Sean was saying, it's a really good summer like scare film. You can go in, you can, granted, I don't like that it's almost 3 hours long. I mean, that was the most difficult part, because you get into it, it kind of ramps up right out the gate, and towards the end, it just kind of like drops off. And there's a lot of stuff they could have taken out to condense it more and make it more around 2 hours. But definitely the monsters and stuff in this film are really cool. There's a lot of jump scares. And you can tell there's the acting was good. So a lot of time and effort was put into this. So I think it warrants, at least a 7.
Yeah. for me, like, again, I just had so much fun. Like, I'd probably give it like a 9. And again, that's not saying it's like nearly flawless at all. It's just my level of enjoyment. Like, for all its flaws, my level of enjoyment was so much higher than so many other things that I've seen in theater this year, or even the past couple of years in this genre, in this wheelhouse. And yeah, I think the first film is a better film through story-wise and all that. But when I put it on the other day, I was easily trailing off and not really watching it. So, and weirdly enough, I think for me, this is one I would rather just throw on in the background because I could pop in any time and either see James McAvoy, Bill Hader, or Jessica Chastain, and then an awesome scary scene with one of them.
Well, maybe they will recut a version that intermingles the stories. Because they could probably go in and make an interesting mini-series out of it, kind of like Tarantino did with Hateful Eight, and intercut the present day with the kids, and cut it back and forth and trim out a lot of the unnecessary
They kind of do have
exposition.
a lot of kid stuff in this, though, if you think about it.
And also, the kid stuff looks terrible because it's very...
Did they de-age those kids?
They did, because the Finn Wolfhard, who's Mike on Stranger Things, and Richie in this, looks very... Because if you watch Stranger Things, between those seasons, he got noticeably taller in age, and you can tell based on some of the stuff that they really leaned on his glasses.
So the kid that was like, chubby when he was younger, I feel like there was one scene where his eyes looked huge. I'm like, did they de-age that kid?
I think they had to de-age
That's so
all of
weird.
them.
But see, for me, I like the fast pace. So if I was going to turn it on, I just want the fast pace of what it is now to watch as just like a meat and potatoes thing. You know what I mean? Like, hey, look Bill Hader in the scene, or just, like whatever, look at this cool scene. Like just kind of watch it in bites, because for me, the story isn't good enough in this one to like, oh, I'm going to sit here and watch it for the story. I just want to kind of have fun. I might turn it on to have fun. But the first one, I thought was great. I really loved it. I probably gave it at least a 9 as well. Yeah. But turning on again, it was slower to start. And it was building up the mythos and all those things. But I'm not, at any given moment, I'm not like jazzed to see those specific actors, even though they're good in that first one. Based on who they're like, the girl, I think she was in Sharp Objects, and she was great in that. Again, but she's not, she's not a mature actress who I've been watching for a while or something like that, where I'm like, oh, I love them in this. So for me, it does come down to those external factors that so many films are based around that sometimes get in the way of the story. Like, oh, who are we going to cast in it? What do we, what spectacles are we going to have? For some reason, for me, all that stuff overpowered it enough to make it work in its favor. But it could have went really wrong. If they wouldn't have got the casting right in this, I think, for me, this film would have been like...
Yeah, because
I don't know, the scares were so good, but if I didn't like those characters and the performances weren't good, like, it could have easily been a 6.
I don't if the acting was bad, I don't think the monsters by themselves would be able to hold
I could have given this simply a 6 if they would have the wrong cast.
Yeah.
So for me, it hangs on that so much, because I just, again, love seeing all those. So we can jump into spoilers now.
Yeah, so if you haven't seen the movie, make sure to jump back, because we will discuss spoilers that go throughout the course of the movie and the ending. And we will start that now. So the big thing that I think that watching it, that I thought they did to the detriment of the characters, don't know if this is in the book or the miniseries, they made Beverly seem kind of... So she shows up and then's like, oh, I have a thing for Bill, even though he's married, I want to kiss him. And then she's like, oh, wait a minute, Ben wrote me the poetry, and I'm just now realizing he's beautiful now, so I'm going to be with him and kiss him underwater. They made her seem so flip-floppy and so superficial. I thought that they didn't really do enough with that.
Yeah.
It's like, oh...
It's the breakneck pace of this film. Yeah, it seems like a lot of that was lost.
It's just like, oh, I thought that he wrote the poetry for me, so I was into him, but it was actually this other one, so now I'm into him. It seems very flighty and...
For me, it seems the same exact bullet point and like lack of care of all those other issues. And because they didn't give anything any time, I was like, okay, well, they don't care about any of this stuff that much. So I thought I was okay with it, because they glossed over everything, Yeah,
I just thought like, and two, like I said, there's the element of like, so Bill kissed somebody else and like just supposedly just go home and doesn't tell his wife it's okay because she nagged at him in the beginning.
He's in Hollywood, baby.
he's used to the casting couch.
Yeah, I mean, come on. She knows the game. She knows the score. No, who knows? There could have been a scene where they split up, like Jessica Chastain's. You don't know. I don't know, but it wasn't in the film. But I was just like, I didn't care that much, because, so another thing too, I'm like, all these characters, like, man, they've all left and been very successful, most of them, like beyond wildest dreams of any, like one person of any of us.
But then Mike, who's the one non-white character, stays home and is not successful.
Yeah. So I was like, oh man, this really deflates any sort of like putting yourself in those character shoes. But then I was like, I don't care to be in these character shoes. I like these actors and characters, and I'll just watch them in their world. These people were really very successful. When the first one, I think you maybe put yourself in their shoes because it's nostalgia, like, oh, that was like me when I was a kid in the 80s or whatever. And maybe that's a disconnect, but for me, I'm like, I don't care that I'm not in these, because Derek always talks about being relatable. He wants something to be relatable.
Having Bill be like a book writer who's a screenwriter and all that stuff in Hollywood, that is very much like wink, wink, nod.
Yes. Yes.
And I think like over time, I really want people to get away from that, because I'm tired of movies with characters being artists or writers or whatever, where they live billionaire lifestyles that isn't true for 99% of people in those fields.
I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it when it works. I don't care. You can keep writing in. If a story works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
So like
but that is all
have someone that
very
works.
prevalent.
Have characters that work at Circle K, gas stations.
That's called Clerks.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a good movie.
Or like a lot of times too, like not to go off of a tangent, like when people have characters work daytime, like corporate business jobs, they get it completely wrong most of the time, and it's not rings true whatsoever for that experience. Yeah. But it's also just because the people who are writing it are writers by trade who didn't come from those backgrounds. But like other things, so Eddie's wife, the really overbearing, over-controlling wife.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that they didn't really touch on how she reacted to his death. And how do you explain that? He's in this tunnel that collapsed and he got stabbed.
I think that would have like totally killed the pacing of the end of the film.
No, I understand.
I think that she was there for comic relief and to build out his character. It wasn't for her. You know, like I don't think she wasn't developed to be her own character. She was there to build out what this kid turned into and his life. And I think for me, that
really comes from, from the first movie, his mother.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like it's all about building out his character, and I think it was smart. Like, you know what I mean? That's you got to know when to shave off that stuff, and it doesn't matter, regardless if like it would have been interesting to see in a real life situation or whatever.
But then too, like other stuff that kind of fell flat was the note they all got from Stanley that he had written before he.
Yeah, that was...
He wasn't committing suicide. He thought he was going to weigh them down because he wasn't strong enough.
Yeah, I think that was a bad message, which there's been some bad suicide messaging.
Kill yourself. Yeah.
Yes, that was terrible messaging. Mm-hmm. Again, but it is because of how flighty they are about everything. I'm like, whatever. They handle a lot of stuff in this film poorly. Like, I'm just going to say, forget all of that stuff and I'm not here for that. But that was terrible messaging, I think. And like, that was not the right way to go about that, which is so weird. That wasn't Warner Brothers another? Did they do Lights Out?
Yeah.
Like,
so they've had two movies that have a message like, oh, if you're going to be a burden, kill yourself.
Yes.
Which is not a message at all that we agree with. Do the opposite.
No, it's like, I can't believe, you can change it, Yeah,
you don't have to stick with the book that was written in the 80s before a lot of stuff kind of came to light.
Just have Pennywise, I know he was in Dare, I don't know, just something. Have Pennywise scare him to death immediately so he passed away because he wasn't strong enough because he didn't face his fears. Like be a cautionary thing. Not like he just straight up killed himself because he thought he couldn't hang with them like that.
And like other things like, it did seem like Pennywise could have killed the Losers Club at any point he wanted to, so I'm not really sure why he didn't.
Yeah. It really seemed like he was playing with like Bill Hader a lot too. Yeah. And that whole thing, like, but I guess the thing of feeding on fear, like, feeding on that fear, it wasn't just like, it wasn't about just killing, it was about creating fear.
There's also the subtext that was a big deal that was really more in the subtext of the movie that a lot of people watched it and would not have picked up on at all. So the opening of the movie with the, kind of homophobic hate crime of the couple getting attacked and then one of them being killed by Pennywise. And then throughout the movie, you get a flashback where it shows Richie at a arcade and then he wants to hang out with this other kid, and then the kid starts calling him like slurs and stuff, and his cousin comes in, he's like the bully and stuff like that, and then Pennywise like, I know your secret, I'll tell you about your secret, and then at the end, like, he implies that he had unrequited feelings or affection for Eddie.
Yes, yeah.
So it's like this very subtextual thing.
I don't think it was subtextual, I think it was very clear.
But like in a movie that had things that beat you over the head with these story beats and really didn't give any subtlety to it at all, for that to be so subdued.
No, I feel like it was very... I don't know, did you pick up on that, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, kind of.
I mean, at first I thought, in the arcade, I was like, oh, are they just teasing him because, because they are extremely like sensitive and homophobic. But then it goes right into that scene with Pennywise, like, I'll tell everybody your secret. And so I was like, oh yeah, obviously that was it. For me, that was like clear as day. Now, for like a 10-year-old that's never, maybe thought about, homosexuality, that may have not clicked for them. But for me, I was like totally thought it was like clear as day. And it was all about him, that there wasn't. Actually, I was waiting for the end of the film. Like, you can't end it like this, but there almost needs to be a bullet point of him being like, it would have been terrible, but like putting his arm like, guys, I gotta say something. I'm gay. You know what I mean? Like that's what it felt like it was maybe gonna do. But I'm like, there's no way
all
because
in the water.
Yeah, or like in the they're walking through the street together. I think at one point maybe, but like they couldn't have done that because that would have been so cheesy
and so on the nose.
So on the nose. But like, no, I was honestly waiting for some sort of thing like that to close his story loop because he never kind of came out. You know what I mean? Like that felt like that was left by the wayside.
Like I understand how in 19, if they were so that wasn't in the book. I don't.
But
think.
maybe they knew. Maybe they gathered
think
that.
That was an extrapolation where Stephen King's like, yeah, that wasn't my intention, but I enjoyed that change. But in 1990, if they had done that, that would have been more controversial back then.
Yeah.
Today's world is not controversial at all. You open with a couple openly kissing and stuff, like, so I don't understand why they couldn't, like, did the studio say we don't want a main character in this movie to be explicitly gay? If we were going to include it, it has to be subtext. Like, I wonder if that still sticks around.
I feel like it was pretty explicit because I felt like everybody had their demons in this film. That's what Pennywise tears them for. That was his specific one. Like, otherwise, there was nothing. You know what I mean? Like, that was his specific thing. And it would almost been cheesy if, Pennywise is like, do you like boys? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that would have been cheesy and like, that would have actually deflated it more, I think.
Or if Pennywise, like, put him in a bear hug and start kissing.
Honestly, that was almost handled better than all the other stuff in the film. You know what I mean? Almost, as far as like the abuse and all that.
I think it's just the fact that everything else was so explicit that they would have something be so subdued and subtextual. Like, I understand that it was there and pretty clear and you walked away and thought about it. It's like, oh yeah, but in the movie, the text of the film, no one in the screenplay said anything.
Yeah. It's weird that I feel like that loop never got closed of him facing his fears in that regard. You know what I mean? Like that was, I think, a thread left hanging.
Yeah. So I guess we've kind of covered all of our thoughts.
Anything else for you,
unless
Chad?
there's anything else?
I mean, I would say like the big reveal of what
Pennywise
actually is. And I guess it was like it crash landed millions of years ago or something like that. So it's been around since like, ancient civilizations, Native American folklore.
But it's weird that it's just Sindari. It's not like it's this entity that hit Earth that created fear throughout the world. And you know what I mean? Like, granted, you don't want to like go on a big scale, but it's a weird thing. It was like just Sindari.
And see, that's the confusion. Like if this thing is like an alien entity, is it physical? Is it, because it seems like they're able to control everything just based on their thoughts. Yeah. Like they're able to shrink him down just by having like their intentions put to say, hey, you are this over and over. Yeah. To where he shrinks down. And then it seemed like, I guess that area down there, I guess there was a spaceship or whatever it was.
Yeah, they said wherever it crash landed. So
or maybe it was attached
residue
to
from
whatever,
it or something. Yeah,
whatever, like the asteroid or whatever that crash landed. And I don't know if that like, because when you walk in there, you can see that black goo stuff like floating up. So was that just something that was isolated to that town that created that fear for anybody that allowed it?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was just isolated to that. Like,
I don't know if there's like,
I don't know if, I guess Pennywise is, I mean, basically, I guess
it was a cross between like spiritual and is this thing cosmic, actual physical? Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it was maybe something physical. I guess it doesn't bend to the properties of carbon-based life form, but I guess Pennywise is essentially just a bully. Like, even starting off, the bullies beat up that couple and then they send one off the thing. Yeah. Like, I think Pennywise is just a bully. When he finds out your weakness, he gets you for it, but then in the end, you realize like, oh wait, he's pretty soft. You know what I mean? I guess that it was like not great. You know, the ending was not good and whatever. I get the messaging, but
it almost feels like Pennywise is just a tulpa.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Something that was manifested by someone
their fears
locally,
or whatever. Yeah.
Versus a physical
but if you're gonna do a tulpa that book may have worked like that, but for more palatable to audiences, like, oh, it's an alien thing. Oh, okay. You know what I mean? Like, even though tulpas, granted, I believe in the existence of alien life in some regards, but even though a tulpa is like just as almost believable as like this Pennywise creature coming from, but people just can stomach alien explanations more, I think, than anything.
Well, and two, they very quickly said, oh, we don't believe you're small, and then he immediately gets affected and shrinks.
Yeah.
He had just impaled and killed their friend.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where kind of the logic of, this is how it's going to end. It's going to just kind of end this way.
When was it written? Was that
in the 80s? Yeah, early 80s, was this, first half of the 80s.
So this was pre-Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Because this movie is a killer clown from outer space.
Yeah, that's true.
This was
Stephen King was in this too.
Yes, a great cameo, I thought.
Yeah. Was he in the first one too?
I don't think so. I don't remember him. Yeah, but again, it's been a long time since I've sat there and watched. Last watched. Yeah,
because I had to tell my cousins that's Stephen King. Right?
Oh, they didn't know?
No, they're like, who?
Oh, the novel was 1986.
Oh wait, when was? Look up.
Killer Clowns was 1988.
So
Killer Clowns was after.
So Stephen King saw Killer Clowns from Outer Space and he thought...
No, it was 86. Killer Clowns is 88.
Oh, okay. So
Killer Clowns
I was wondering if they read the end of the book like, oh, this clown's from outer space. What if we had a whole carnival of clowns from outer space?
Well, the movie Troll included a boy named Harry Potter that had to fight a magical troll.
Did he have a lightning bolt?
I don't think so, but he had glasses.
Yeah.
So J.K. Rowling stole that from Troll. But yeah, so like with this movie... The ending, it does feel kind of like a lot of the movies were just kind of like, with the ending being
like... It feels like an 80s floaty ending. It feels like an 80s ending.
It feels kind of floaty, and it feels kind of not substantial. And you... Like, I just think the way it ended was very much in the mold of, like you said, the 80s storytelling. Yeah. And I think that...
It's like a roller coaster. It's like, oh, it just ends,
Yeah, but...
after like 6 hours of story.
So there's... But I mean, like,
I don't... kind of get a message, but it's just a simple message for each person. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it would have probably worked better. I don't know. If they changed it more to have like a specific thing they do and, a physical thing that happens... Like that was
also maybe related to thematic. You know what I mean? Like it was thematically linked as well, or it wasn't. But this was literally just the thematic thing of shouting him, saying he's, a little wuss. You know what I mean?
And then he deflates into a little rubber person. Which was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah.
That reminded me of Killer Clowns Outer Space.
Yeah, so the ending of it, it was in the source materials and the other adaptations. When I remember the series from the 90s, I always kind of didn't remember much about the ending or care for it. It was all the beginning stuff that was like the more scary things to me. So, yeah, I think that, having Pennywise running around as a CGI crab monster or spider monster for 25 minutes was probably not the greatest use of Bill Skarsgård, but... because it did such a good job of utilizing him in prior segments. But, I mean, they had to end it somehow, and that's how the source material was.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, and I think it's good they stayed true. For better or for worse.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, just... They want to remake it again, go crazy with it. Like Pet Sematary. They made a... they did Pet Sematary, the original, and then the remake was quite different. Like... now that we have a film adaptation of this with a budget, maybe in 15, 20 years, they go wild with it like that,
Yeah, but it's all cyclical.
Yeah. We'll get another It.
Which I'm not saying do that. I think that, I think they've kind of covered It for now. They can probably wait.
Oh, yes, yeah.
But yeah, you never know.
But with the money this made, and there are a lot of young audience members going to see it. My younger cousins who are like my nieces, essentially, they were going to go see it the other night. You know what I mean? Like, this is creating... in 20 years, there'll be nostalgia for this for them, and primed and ready to go. Another Stephen King long after he's gone and dead.
Yeah. Yep. So I guess I can wrap up our discussion of It Chapter 2. You can go to the website, hbtvs.com. You now no longer have to type out the full name of Passive Video Store.
You got these shirts too.
Yeah, you can go to the merch store and buy shirts. You can go check all those out, which is very cool. And we discuss it more in depth on the creepy supernatural podcast. Yeah, so we discuss a little bit more in depth there. But you can go check it out. It's on the website, hbtvs.com. Find everything we're doing there. Follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all those good places. And make sure to leave a review if you're listening on any podcast app, on iTunes, or I looked at the other thing the other day, since there's like an RSS feed, we're on like 20 different apps for podcasts, like on Android and all that stuff. So if you're using a podcast app, leave us a review. That helps other people find the podcast. And if you want to find the things we're doing specifically on the internet, you can find me on Instagram at @TheWilliamCaps.
And I'm on Instagram at Bringer Spears.
I'm on Twitter at BlevensSean.
And that'll wrap up this episode of the House of Visor podcast. Thanks for listening.
House by the